Once again, good afternoon and welcome. Today, the United States Army, Military District of Washington, represented by the soldiers of the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, and the United States Army Band, Pershing's Own, pay a special tribute to Lieutenant General Douglas A. Sims II, Director of the Joint Staff, who is retiring after 34 years of distinguished service to the United States Army and our nation. Participating in today's review, from left to right, is the United States Army Band, Pershing's Own. Formed in 1922 by then Army Chief of Staff, General John J. Pershing, the United States Army Band is the premier band of our senior service. Pershing's Own provides musical support for ceremonies and special events in our nation's capital and throughout the United States. The United States Army Band is under the direction of Major Aaron Morris and led by Drum Major Adrian Doctor. Elements of the Old Guard include Honor Guard Company, commanded by Captain Taylor Massa, and led by First Sergeant Shane Grinder. Next online is Charlie Guard Company, commanded by Captain Noah Van Blarkum, and led by First Sergeant Stephen Day. Next online is Hatchet Company, commanded by Captain Joel Crawford, and led by First Sergeant Mitchell Martinez. Following is a Commander-in-Chief's Guard, patterned after the unit created by General George Washington in 1776 to be his personal guard. The Commander-in-Chief's Guard is commanded by Captain Sean Martin and led by First Sergeant Weston Blakely. The last element online, dressed in the Continental Musician's uniform, is the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. During the American Revolution, musicians wore the reverse colors of their parent infantry unit. The men and women of the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps maintained this tradition by wearing red coats instead of the infantry blue. The Corps is led today by Drum Major Tyler Halderman. Ladies and gentlemen, moving into position is the commander of troops for today's ceremony, Colonel Thomas Kilbride, Commander, 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard. Since the days of the American Revolution, the colors have been one of the most important elements of a military unit. Therefore, taking the center of our formation in just a moment, and bearing the national color, is the nation's foremost color team, the 3rd Infantry's Continental Color Guard, led by Staff Sergeant Trevor Kemp. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the advancing of the colors.
Advance, colors.
Please be seated.
Step left. Face. Ready, cut. Coat, press center, drill. Officer, just then, sir. Go. Coat, ready, one. Officers, ready, go.
The history of the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment reflects the growth and development of our nation. 55 well-earned battle streamers, 2 Valorous Unit Awards, 3 Meritorious Unit Commendations, and 5 Superior Unit Awards attest to the Old Guard's record of bravery in action and achievements during peacetime. In 1922, the War Department granted permission for the Old Guard to pass in review with bayonets fixed. The Old Guard will now fix bayonets to the traditional beat of the drum.
Sound, fix, bayonet. Shoulder, firelocks, and 1, and 2, and 3. Pull, right, shoulder. Oh. Ready, cut.
Ladies and gentlemen, taking the reviewing stand is the reviewing official for today's ceremony, Lieutenant General Douglas A. Sims II, accompanied by the host, General Randy A. George, Chief of Staff of the Army. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as honors are rendered and remain standing for the invocation delivered by Chaplain Colonel Rob Allman.
Present. Arms. Step. Present. Colors, ready, cut.
Ready? Rust! Ready? Rust!
Ladies and gentlemen, Chaplain Colonel Rob Allman.
Distinguished leaders, families, and friends, I invite you to join me in prayer. Lord of all creation, the ancient texts remind us that your ways are beyond our imaginations, and your sovereign timing rules over the fleeting follies of our age. May you grace us with your holy presence now, and grant us peace as we celebrate this joyful yet bittersweet occasion of the retirement of your faithful servant, Lieutenant General Douglas A. Sims II, from the active ranks of our Army's long grade line. We give you thanks, O Lord, for bestowing upon General Sims the gift of wisdom, the gift of courage and devotion to duty, and blessing all who served alongside him with a sense of purpose and a feeling of value and worth that motivated so many in his formations to be and remain always ready, ever vigilant, and forever fired up. Of course, behind all that inspiring energy of enthusiasm, O Lord, we are grateful for the foundation of family that has steadied his ways. We especially give thanks, O Lord, for Faye and Maddie, who have sacrificed so much over the years, yet willingly served alongside their soldier with a cadence of commitment and care for others along the way. No matter when or where the Army ordered, they were trusting you, if even living on a prayer. And now, as they enter this new season of life, may your Spirit fall fresh upon each of them, renewing their faith in you and love for one another. And now grant us all, O Lord, with love, laughter, and joy, as we celebrate D.A. and his life of service well lived. Amen.
Please be seated.
Stand up! guard. Attention!
Close. Right shoulder. Close. Ready. Cut.
Post staff. Staff. Right. Face.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the advancing of the colors and remain standing for the United States national anthem.
Colors. Forward. March. Sir, a person be honored and colors present.
Shoulder. Balance.
And 1, and 2, and 3. Present! Forward! And 1, and 2, and 3. Detachment. Present. Forward!
Please be seated. General George and Mrs. George are now moving into position to honor today's retiree and spouse. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, July 9, 1918, has awarded the Distinguished Service Medal to Lieutenant General Douglas A. Sims II, United States Army. General Sims distinguished himself by exceptional meritorious service in a duty of great responsibility as Director of the Joint Staff from January 2024 to August 2025. During this period, as Director for Operations and subsequently as Director of the Joint Staff, General Sims' exceptional leadership and strategic vision ensured the Joint Staff remained agile and responsive to a complex and rapidly evolving global landscape. As the Director for Operations and the Director of the Joint Staff, he provided accurate, timely, and sage military advice to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, and the President of the United States. The distinctive accomplishments of General Sims reflect great credit upon himself, the United States Army, and the Department of War. Headquarters, Department of the Army Special Orders. By order of the Secretary of the Army, the following general officer is retired. Lieutenant General Douglas A. Sims II. General George is also presenting the United States flag to Lieutenant General Sims for his faithful service to his country. On the occasion of retirement of this distinguished soldier, we also recognize the outstanding service of his spouse, Mrs. Faye Sims, who is being presented with the Distinguished Public Service Medal. Mrs. Faye Sims distinguished herself by exceptional, superior public service in support of service members, civilians, and family of the U.S. Army and Joint Force over the last 34 years. Mrs. Sims' tireless efforts ensured the voices of service members and families were heard and valued, and she worked diligently to identify and address critical gaps in support services, ultimately enhancing the overall well-being of every command she has worked with throughout the U.S. Army. The distinctive accomplishments of Mrs. Sims are in keeping with the finest traditions of public service and reflect great credit upon herself, the U.S. Army, and the Department of War. On the occasion of retirement of this distinguished soldier, we also recognize the outstanding service of Mrs. Faye Sims, who is being presented with the Department of the Army Certificate of Appreciation for her faithful and devoted service. It is dedicated support which made possible such a lasting contribution to our nation. Signed, General Randy A. George, Chief of Staff of the Army. At this time, Lieutenant General Sims is presenting a bouquet of red roses to Mrs. Sims, signifying his love by honoring her for her unwavering support for over 34 years of military service. Also, a bouquet of red roses is being presented to his daughter, Maddie. We are proud to recognize Lieutenant General Sims and Mrs. Sims' devotion to our country, and we wish them happiness and prosperity in their well-earned retirement.
Hold guard. Hold. Head. Jump.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the posting of the colors.
Post colors. Stack. Right. Face.
Please be seated.
Hold guard. Pass. In review. Right. Backward. Face. Right shoulder. Right wheel. Arm. Advance. Far left.
And 1, and 2, and 3,
Front leg close to the rear.
4, steps.
March.
1, 2, 3, hold, hold.
Now. Forward. March.
Ladies and gentlemen, General George.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Got a big crowd here. I'm not surprised. Celebrating what many of us know is one of our greatest soldiers that we've had in our Army. So just to start off, a big thanks, DA and Faye, for all that you've done for our Army and our country. And I want to recognize all the great folks that we have here. So I'm going to start off with the chairman. Good to see you out of the Pentagon. And over here, thanks, Chairman, for joining us. General Mound, Chairman, really good to see you. Thanks for being here. General Amate, sir, good to see you. Thank you for being here. I know you spent some time downrange in Afghanistan with DA. I'm told Undersecretary Baker is here. Sasha, good to see you. Assistant Secretary Abercrombie, Assistant Secretary Mayer, good to see you. Kelly, former Chief of Staff, great to see you, Kelly. Admiral Kilby is here. Jim, great to see you. General Clark, it's a long list. Ron, good to see you. General Bob Brown, good to see you. General Ham, General Paxton. Is General Paxton up there? Semper Fi to you. Sir, great to see you. Vice, DAS, SMA, I think SMA Grinston is out here. Ambassador Bass, I was told, was going to be here. Ambassador, great to see you. First, I want to start off like I always do. If you're on the Joint Staff, stand up. All those folks on the Joint Staff. Chairman, these are all the people not at work. So I just want to highlight all these. I can't believe all those people got to see sunlight here. You know, I don't know what's happened on the Joint Staff, but glad you can be here. And DA, I hope you and Faye enjoy this celebration. And I want to recommend up front that you wait until tomorrow to check on the Royals Philly score. I don't want to put a damper on your day. And by the way, I understand that you're supposed to buy Joe Ryan, I know Joe's here, a case of Heineken every time the Yankees outplay the Royals in a season. And I hate to say it, but you probably need to hit the Class 6 pretty soon. Probably wishing you were a Cubs fan at this point. DA, I think Jim Mingus summed you up pretty well. Humble, brilliant, calm, inspirational, the kind of guy everyone wants to be. You took all the hard jobs, and you've been masterful in every one of them. There's a lot more to say on that, but before I talk any more about you, I'd like to talk about the team who supported you all along the way. And I'm going to start with Faye, DA's bride of almost 34 years. DA and Faye met when they were both going to school at George Washington University. They stayed friends when DA started at West Point and began dating his first year. But if we think about the timeline here, I think it's pretty clear that DA knew for a while that Faye was the one. Once they started dating, he didn't take long to pop the question, and they were married 6 months after graduation. Faye, thanks for finally giving DA a chance. You've been the heartbeat of the Sims family, held everything together through 18 moves and 6 deployments, served as a family readiness group leader for all of DA's commands, and stepped up to the plate when times got difficult. I know that when DA's team suffered casualties downrange, you were there immediately to help walk the grieving spouses through the awful process of accepting and navigating the loss of their loved ones. It is one thing for soldiers to lose a teammate in the fight, and another for a family back home to suddenly find a hole in their lives that will never be filled. Thank you for all you've done for Army families through the years, for being a model of grace and love, and for doing the lion's share in raising such a smart and radiant daughter. So a big round of applause for Faye. Which brings me to Maddie, that smart, radiant daughter. Maddie's always been a high achiever, graduated with a perfect GPA from Washington Liberty High School, and then with honors from Boston College. Since then, she's worked as an account executive for Edelman, which is a marketing firm, and she was in the DC office for about a year and just recently transferred to New York City. And I understand it's Fashion Week. She's up there doing that, so she's taken a little time away from that. What's most notable about Maddie is her contagiously positive spirit. She's a light of the Sims family and a pleasure to be around. Maddie, I do have to throw this out there, given your work in marketing. There's some great job opportunities in Chicago at the Army Enterprise Marketing Office. We were already talking about that, and you can also catch some great ball games with your dad at Wrigley Field. So I just want you to keep that in mind. I also want to welcome DA's dad, Doug, and his wife, Karen. Doug is a retired Army officer, West Point grad, class of '66, and a Vietnam veteran. And sir, I would like you to stand up and recognize you. Doug, we know you taught DA the importance of service and imbued him with a healthy dose of competition. I understand that you got your 6th and 7th jumps alongside DA when he went to airborne school as a cadet, partly dad-son bonding, partly to make sure you still had him beat and could poke fun of him for being a 5-jump chump. I can appreciate that. Dads have to hold out on outdoing their sons for as long as possible. I hear that when DA called you before the mountain phase in Ranger School to brag about him earning his 8th jump, you gave it back, noting that he still didn't have his Ranger tab. Unfortunately, Doug's mom, Jan, is no longer with us, but I know she was an incredible lady and a legend on Fort Belvoir in the 80s and the 90s. She was once a director of youth services there, and in fact, the current youth services building there is named in her honor. She was a loving force in our Army community, and in DA's life. There's also some other family I'd like to welcome. Faye's brother Fitz and his wife Ellen here from Gloucester. They gave me really good they spelled that out so I wouldn't mess that up. Massachusetts, as well as their kids Fitz, Olivia, and Christopher. Faye's older brother Dean, DA's brother Dwight and his wife Crystal, Aunt Janet and her kids Sarah and Brett, Rex and Wendy, who I gather are distant family but close mentors, DA's cousin Jason, a fellow Royals super fan, and a bunch of folks from the class of '91, Duty Shall Be Done. All right, I do want all of those. Your class of '91, step up, stand up. Class of '91. All right, a strong class, but as one of your upperclassmen, I feel I can take a little credit in that. Thanks, everybody, for being here. So in preparation for these remarks, I asked around for some stories about DA, and as you would imagine, that's not a hard task. There's a lot of good ones. And from those, I started to see some valuable life lessons take shape. First, I know that as soon as plebes were allowed stereos at West Point, DA set up a huge set in his barracks room. Of course, being a true gentleman, he typically wore headphones. And it was around the 1988 time frame, so your headphones were connected by a long cord that provided incomers a fun obstacle course to navigate. But even with the headphones, DA was still liable to sing refrains from some of the day's best hits without notice, which of course everyone loved. Or that's what they're saying 34 years later, DA. So life lesson 1, always be courteous and wear headphones. But when Rick Astley's playing, Don't hold back. Second, when you were a young major at CGSC, I know that you and Joe Ryan lived across the street from each other and generally met up every morning to go for a run. You had a plan where you both kept your porch lights on, and if one of you woke up and didn't feel like going, you turned off the light to signal to the other that you were sleeping in. I'm pretty sure you both woke up every morning to see that light on, because good old peer pressure keeps you fit and ready to get back in the fight. So life lesson 2, leave your porch light on because PT is free. And a final story I'll share from Major General Tom O'Connor, who was General Sims' DCG at First ID, and I'm going to tell this story, DA, verbatim. Major General Sims was a commander who could stare down any enemy, eat MREs with gusto, and do push-ups while quoting Clausewitz. But nothing prepared him for the division's rotation to the National Training Center at Fort Irwin. Is this all coming back to you? It started as a routine exercise, the missing train at Yermo, miles draw, and a healthy dose of dry heat. But someone, probably that overzealous observer controller with a flair for drama, decided to toss a CS gas canister into the command tent for realism. Unfortunately, realism meant the commander's pro mask was still in his vehicle. Major General Sims burst out of the tent like a confused raccoon, escaping a dumpster fire, eyes watering, nose running, and dignity trailing behind him like a lost boot. "We are under chemical attack," he wheezed, flailing toward the nearest Joshua tree for cover. Just as the medics were dousing him in water and sympathy, the Ops Sergeant Major yelled, "Attention all personnel. Due to an outbreak, COVID protocols are now in effect." DA Sims blinked through the tears. "You mean I just got gassed and quarantined training day 1 at the National Training Center?" For the next 10 days, the CG fought the division from a plastic bubble in the back of a Humvee with his pro mask at his side. So life lesson 3, PCCs and PCIs, pre-combat checks and pre-combat inspections, they can save your life and your dignity. Finally, 2 more. From Jim Mingus, balls that don't bounce are still worth slamming. I don't really have context on this one, but it seems profound. It's a good tip for dodgeball. Either way, it's on the list. And last, it's never too late to shore up your debts. And on that note, while you're at the Class 6, you actually owe Joe 36 cases of Heineken. And also, and I got this as feedback, $20 to Paulie Kratiger. He said that if I'd collect it, he'd split it with me. So I want to make sure that came up. DA, you are a one-of-a-kind generational leader, and you'll be sorely missed in the building and across our formations. As I like to do, I'll try to sum you up with 3 things. First, you are a warfighter. You've led troopers all over our Army and the world, from Bragg to the 75th Ranger Regiment, Alaska, the Old Guard, Fort Lewis, Germany, and Riley, and in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. You know your craft, and you lead the way, demanding expertise and excellence from the teams you build. Second, you are a great teammate. When there's a mission to be done, you roll up your sleeves, and you make working fun for the whole team, even when the mission is serious. General Bob Brown told a story from when DA was his brigade S3 in Iraq. DA never knows which story is going to pop up on this, I'm sure. There were over 12,000 soldiers in or attached to the brigade for about 10 months. Mosul was under extremist control at that point in the war, and every day presented new challenges. The brigade TAC went out daily to check on units. They put 55,000 miles on each striker. Every time the Every time the team left the wire, DA would break the tension over the radio with words of encouragement from his talking President Bush action figure. And General Clark would like it known that it was you, DA, who against all odds within the scope of the existing television contract figured out how to get ESPN on Pentagon TVs, which will be very helpful for all the people missing work, because I know that's where they're going to be this weekend. So joint staff will be able to enjoy it. Third, you transform and elevate people around you. I've had people tell me these last few weeks that knowing you has made them not just better officers, but better people. That's a gift, and you've impacted generations of leaders and soldiers in your career. From Colonel Reggie Harper, I have come across few officers in 28 years who cared as much about their subordinates' careers as their own. General Sims is such an officer. I would carry a bucket of gasoline to hell for General Sims. Thank you, DA and Faye, for all that you've done for our soldiers and our families, and for being tremendous friends to so many of us through the years. I know that Team Sims is going to have some fun bouncing around a bit. Best of luck to you in your next adventures. You know we're going to continue to bother you, so I would tell you to stay in touch, but Patty and I are especially interested to hear when you add a new four-legged friend to the family. Rangers lead the way. This will defend. Thank you, DA and Faye.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant General Sims.
Well, Chief, thank you. Pretty surreal. I was doing really well holding myself together, and I'm going to get back together here in a second. Chairmans, I'm not even sure what the plural is. Chiefs, vices, General Brown, General Ham, General Clark, General Ahmadzai, my brother, General Paxton, fellow flag officers, senior civilians, classmates from the West Point class of '91, UA, family, friends. First of all, and they're not here, but a huge shout out to the Old Guard and the Army Band and the Army Protocol team. You won't know it, but I was in Charlie Company, the Old Guard. I commanded a company there. And as a result, I've watched these organizations in 25 years with kind of an insider's eye. And everything I've found them to do has always been magnificent. Today is absolutely no exception. I think, and I tried to ask the RCO, I think they may have put Charlie Guard in the formation today because I was retiring. And my guess is those kids are pretty upset with me. Everybody wants to march on a Friday afternoon. I sure wish we'd been indoors and passed in review before the speakers when I was here. That would have been a huge morale boost. But I'll tell you, it was just extraordinary to have them here today. It's also serendipitous that Mark Ramirez, who's my lead protocol for this, was also in my company back when I was in the Old Guard. And so a huge thanks to Mark for all he did then and for putting everything together today with his team for my final ceremony in Conway Hall. I'm overwhelmed by the remarkable collection of people who are here today. I've got folks from my high school, from my, as I mentioned, my West Point class, duty shall be done, all my assignments, 82nd to the Joint Staff, friends from Massachusetts, Kansas, and all sorts of places in between that we've met along the way. My wellness partner in crime from the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, Dr. Amy Adler, is here. Even my mother's 97-year-old best friend, Lori, who flew in from Oregon. In short, I'm blown away, and I'm grateful for and honored by your attendance here today. You know, I have my squad leaders from one of my platoons are here, my first sergeant when I was a company commander, RTOs, drivers, staff members, fellow commanders. I'm blown away. Chief, I'm especially thankful to you for doing this ceremony, hosting this ceremony here, and for all you and Patty have done for Faye, Maddie, and me. As you mentioned, and it's no surprise, General George was my commander on my very first day at West Point. He was my company commander, was my Sandhurst squad leader, and then 38 years later remains the tremendous example of a leader who cares deeply about our people and our Army, as does Patty. And so thank you both for everything you've done for us and for our Army. In 1994, I was a platoon leader in the 2nd Ranger Battalion, and I was in my office one morning working on a training packet. And in the room with me was my platoon sergeant. He was precisely the type of non-commissioned officer that my infantry mentors and instructors had prepared me for. He was amazingly competent, fit, and knew everything about the men in our platoon. As I was working, there was a knock at the door, and one of my squad leaders entered with a young private who had been in the unit for about 2 months or so. Sir, when PFC Smith arrived, he was missing $40 on his paycheck. We went to finance and tried to get it fixed, but again on his paycheck this month, he's missing that $40, and we were hoping you could help him out. I put my pencil down and I looked up at Smith. That's exactly why I existed. I will absolutely take care of that $40, Smitty. I've got it, no worries. He looked visibly relieved. The squad leader thanked me, and the two exited the room and closed the door behind them. I reached back for my pencil, and I got back to work. From across the room, my platoon sergeant said, "Sir, what are you doing?" I said, "Toe, I'm working on that training packet. I got to get it done." He said, "What about that $40? I said, "Don't worry, I'll get that fixed." Sir, if PFC Smith went to his squad leader to get that $40, and then he came to you, his platoon leader, an officer in his chain of command, that's a big deal. To you, that $40 may not be that much. You may eat or drink that away this weekend. To him, that money may be for gas. It could be he and his wife need it for groceries or diapers. To him, that's the most important problem in his life. Man, I dropped my pencil and I ran out of that room to get that $40. In the 30 years since, I've never stopped thinking about that $40. As the years passed, the problems people brought me changed. As a battalion or division commander, they were typically on a different level. But I always try to remember that if they came to me, for that person, it was the most important problem, most difficult problem in their life. In the Army, I just noticed this, Chief. You don't have to wear a name tag with this uniform, so I'm going to pop it right off. In the Army, everything we do is about people. It's how we treat them, how we react to one another, how we motivate, how we inspire, how we comfort, how we love. The military doesn't have a monopoly in this regard, but the stakes of what we do are just different. Before I ever arrived at West Point, I was fortunate enough to have people in my life who demonstrated the best examples of leadership. My high school principal and baseball coach, multiple teachers and staff, combined with my parents, to not just talk about how we treat one another, but to demonstrate it and model it for me. That continued upon arrival at the academy, where I was again fortunate to see such superb examples, this time in uniform. I mentioned before that General George was there on day one at West Point. We also had a company tactical officer who was simply magnificent. In October 1987, I was formally counseled for the first time. As a plebe at the academy and in all of my attack, I was nervous about my first individual interaction with him. He was a major, and he was a force. Well over 6 feet tall and physically strong, his presence was felt whenever he was around or when he wasn't. During Saturday morning inspections, we would invariably end up using all of our time and still have one or two things that we hadn't put in the correct place. Often we'd hide them in our laundry bag or high in our wardrobes. As if there were listening devices or cameras in our rooms, the tech would enter the room and walk directly to the hidden item. It was unreal. On this fall day, I pinged down the porches of our barracks to his office and knocked on the door. I was instructed to enter and to take a seat on the opposite side of his desk. It was the most uncomfortable I'd been in my 18 years, and I sat as tall as I could as he peered across the desk directly into my eyes, into my soul. "So, how are you doing, DA?" he said. It startled me. Only people who really know me know I go by DA. In first encounters with people, it's always Doug or Douglas. The fact he knew my nickname shook me a bit, and it must have been apparent. He reacted. "You surprised I know you go by DA?" "I am, sir," I answered. "There are a lot of things I know about you that you don't think I know." Over the 4 years at the Academy, I came to learn we had to know that much and more about our people. If we expected them to believe in us, then we genuinely had to care about them. When I left West Point, my old roommate and I were in the same battalion for our first assignment. Well, we thought we were something. As you might imagine, we weren't nearly as terrific as we thought we were. But one thing we got right was what we thought made a good platoon leader. A good platoon leader, we thought, was someone who was technically and tactically competent, physically fit, and was a good person. By good person, we didn't mean someone who was hanging out with their soldiers on Friday night. We meant someone who genuinely cared for their people and who was approachable. Standing here today, I think that definition not so long ago was pretty close to right. Today, I'd make it holistically fit, but everything else would be the same. General George Marshall reportedly felt so strongly about the Army's leadership doctrine leading into World War II that he personally wrote the chapter on leadership in the 1941 edition of FM 105, the Army's Operations Manual. In 3.5 pages, Marshall describes his views on what makes the ideal leader. If you stacked up all our leadership doctrine today, it'd be several inches thick. In 3.5 pages of gold, Marshall described his views of what makes the ideal leader. He starts with the most important line. Leadership is based on the knowledge of men. He wrote that 85 years ago. So bring it forward to today. It's just as impactful. Leadership is based on the knowledge of people. In 3 decades, it's been my life's honor to learn about people. People in and out of uniform who I've been blessed to serve with, to comfort or be comforted by, to cry with, laugh with, play golf with, to drink coffee or beer with, to share my fears or listen to theirs, to talk about our families, to be inspired by, to mentor, or be mentored, or so many other ways we interact with one another during the course of our lives. I've been honored to hear the stories of so many men and women, where they came from, what got them to a particular place in life, or to have them ask me about my story. In all cases, I've been inspired and awed. The men and women, seniors, peers, and subordinates who have made my experience so rich are too many to name. In the first draft of my remarks, I tried to find a way to mention individuals as representatives of a collection of people who've made this journey so meaningful. In the end, it would have been too long. I know you're thinking, it could have been longer than this. In the end, it would have been too long, and there was no way I could say any names without saying them all. I'm hopeful those in attendance or watching today will forgive me for the lack of specificity. Please know, each of you had an enormous impact on the officer I am today, and you are directly responsible for everything I did well. To borrow from Chairman Brown, success takes help. Failure, you can do on your own. The number of people in this room is clearly indicative of all the help I've needed, and I am incredibly, incredibly grateful to all of you. Over 30-plus years, I've been continually inspired by those with whom I've served who made the ultimate sacrifice. In peacetime and in war, the loss of these men and women never faded from my memory. I could tell a story about each of the 5 I lost in Afghanistan under my command, but we'd be here for some time, and I wouldn't come close to describing them in the perfect way that they need to be remembered. I will simply tell you, Justin Shoecraft, Cody Board, Eric Nettleton, Jesse Williams, and Edward Bali represented the very best of us. They are the reason we stand here today and that our country is able to move forward. Regardless of how much time passes, their names will never leave my memory or the memory of the men and women of our squadron and regiment. And I am deeply thankful for their example, their devotion, and their sacrifice. I'll take off this uniform today, and like others before me, I'll put it on a hanger, probably in a garment bag, and like the BDU top with a black and gold pinned Ranger tab that hasn't been worn since 1992, periodically I'll come across it in my closet. When I look at it, I'll see the ribbons that tell a story about all the places I've been and the people with whom I served. I'll see the patch on my right shoulder and crest above the pocket that remind me of my contribution to the major units I was fortunate to command. Most importantly, I'll see the stripes on my right sleeve that represent the months and years I served in Iraq or Afghanistan. Several years ago, I attended a promotion in D.C., and I was wearing this uniform when I stopped for a cup of coffee. The uniform was new to the Army at the time, and a man approached me to comment on how much he liked it and its connection to World War II. As we talked, he asked me about the stripes on my right sleeve, asked what they represented. When I told him they each symbolized 6 months in combat, he noted I'd spent a lot of time at war. As I departed the coffee shop, I thought about that last comment and realized the stripes actually meant a great deal more than combat service. In addition to that, they represented the time I had spent separated from my family. They represented the sacrifices of Faye and Maddie, missed birthdays, holidays, homework done without me, softball and soccer games, dance recitals, broken washers and dryers, endless dog walks, and on and on. They also represented prayers and well wishes from them and other family and friends, hundreds of packages, letters, and emails. In short, these stripes are not only a symbol of my service, but of the many unseen and unrecognized supporters who served alongside me, just in a different way. Some of the most ardent supporters were my family. I've been blessed to have a strong family to lean on and who supported me over the course of my life and my career. My mom and dad come from families of 8 and 6 siblings, respectively. As a result, I have numerous aunts, uncles, and cousins who have helped me every step of the way. They are clearly represented by the stripes on my arm. Many of them are in the stands today, and I sincerely appreciate their presence and all they've done for Faye, Maddie, and me. My brother Dwight, his wife Crystal, and their girls are represented on this sleeve. Throughout my service, my brother has been my cheerleader, my fellow karaoke singer, dog training partner, and ultimately one of the finest examples of a good person. His family exudes joy, and I am better every time I'm around them. I wish he would sleep in the bed, not on the couch or the floor when he comes to visit, but we can't have everything we want in life. My brothers-in-law, Fitz and Dean, became my brothers in 1991 and have looked out for Faye and me ever since. Fitz, his wife Ellen, their kids, and Dean formed the foundation of what was affectionately called Yankee School, a term created by a beloved uncle in Kansas City. They entertained, cared for, and helped raise Maddie during routine summer vacations in New England. We could not have had our daughter around better examples of love and kindness and are immensely thankful. As for parents, I couldn't have fared better. My in-laws, Fitz and Marianne Lufkin, traveled to every Army post we called home. They provided Faye and me with continuous love and support throughout our marriage and were with us when Maddie was born. Fitz passed away in 2011, but not before he imprinted our daughter with a spirit of curiosity, respect for academic achievement, and the value of friendship. Marianne is the matriarch of the family and has been our safe harbor for 30-plus years. She provides unconditional love, sound advice, and moral clarity, and she is providing us a home base in our early retirement. We may be testing the limits of that unconditional love. I was sorry she couldn't make it down from Boston for the ceremony, but she is 91 years old and did see me change command here in Conway Hall in 2001. You know what they say, once you've seen one parade in Conway Hall, you've seen them all. My arrival at this spot today is a result of a random interaction between my father and a man who entered the small-town newspaper where he was working as a high school student. When the man asked my dad where he was going to college, my dad told him he didn't think college was in the cards. Given his circumstances in a small Missouri farm town, college wasn't likely an option. Had he heard of West Point? He had not. I'll skip the rest, but that story, my dad's subsequent attendance to the academy, service in the Army, and the trajectory it created for my father, our family, and ultimately for Faye, Maddie, and me is another example of what can happen when someone takes a genuine interest in and cares for people. Because of that conversation, my dad went to West Point, served 27 years in uniform, another 18 as a government civilian. There was never a need for me to look somewhere else to find an example of service. My dad always provided that example. As a result of my exposure to him, his classmates, and those with whom he served, there was very little doubt I would follow in his footsteps and serve in the military. Not a day has passed that I'm not thankful that he lit the path for me to follow. My mom passed away 25 years ago, but not before providing a foundation of strength and character I've worked to build on every day. She was an amazing woman who raised 2 rambunctious boys, worked multiple jobs to do so, and never missed a ball game. As my high school coach can attest, and he's here, you can ask him later, it wasn't unusual to see her catching for me in the front yard and to find her in the front row of the stands in every game. She was kind, generous, thoughtful, and focused on making people's lives better. Combined with my father's example, I was set for success when I left the house for the Army. Their subsequent spouses, Don and Karen, only added value to our lives, and again, I am grateful. Faye and I have been assigned to D.C. a few times, and we've spent a lot of time here visiting my mom. We have some great memories from this area, but none of them can touch the birth of our daughter at the old DeWitt Hospital on Fort Belvoir. As it happens, as the chief mentioned, my mom was the director of youth services at Belvoir, and after her death, the new youth services building she helped build was named in her honor. It was no accident that Maddie was born a 1/10 of a mile from that spot. Since that day, in October, Faye and I have been blown away by the kid she was and the young woman she has become. Her work ethic, intellect, and ability to tackle difficult problems are matched only by her genuine kindness, care for others, and extraordinary sense of humor. We are exceptionally proud of all she's doing personally and professionally, and are excited in retirement to get more time to visit her in New York City. Might be staying with her in Stuytown here for part of our retirement piece. We don't know yet. What I didn't mention earlier, but what the chief alluded to, was I took a detour before going to West Point. Instead of heading there right out of high school, I opted to go to the George Washington University to do Army ROTC and play baseball. When I got there, I was loving Army ROTC, and I realized that West Point was really where I was supposed to be. As I restarted the process for admission to West Point, I also began a friendship that has proven to be the most impactful relationship in my life. I met Faye on a warm Halloween evening in 1986. When I left GW, she became my best friend during my 4 years at West Point. Nearly 40 years after I met her, the last 34 of which she's allowed me to stand by her side as her husband, I know the most significant impact of my trajectory was meeting her. From my commissioning to today's ceremony, through multiple combat tours, losses of people at home and overseas, our 20 permanent changes of station, and the great honor of raising an amazing child, I am so incredibly blessed that Faye is my wife. And I am deeply thankful to her for all she's done for me, for our family, and for the many soldiers, family members she served alongside. One final story as I close. In 2018, Faye and I were attending the Army's one-star initial education when Lieutenant General retired Jim Campbell came to speak about leadership. Over the course of the hour-long session, we were mesmerized by his stories and examples of great leadership during his career. At the end, he came to a close and said, "You know, as I reflect on my career and the best leaders with whom I have served, it all seems to come down to 3 simple things: be kind, be humble, and be thankful. In the end, all the truly inspirational stories of leadership come down to those 3 things." Faye and I looked at each other. He was right. And I leave here today with a view that in or out of uniform, if we can do those 3 things, we can be better versions of ourselves, make our communities a better place in which to live, and keep our Army and Joint Force moving forward for another 250 years. I tried to do that in the Army, and I'm committed to continuing that effort in our next chapter. To borrow a little from a favorite TV character, in my career, I've been privileged to meet with presidents, American and international. I've had lunch with Supreme Court justices and coffee with professional athletes. I've briefed multiple all-Senate and all-House sessions. thrown out the first pitch at the Kansas State-Kansas game, go Cats, and even share part of a single-season stolen base record in the 10 to 12-year-old Bedford Softball League. That's true. Those experiences were incredible and memorable. Of equal importance to me were my time sitting in a striker, telling stories with my crew, or sitting with my feet on the desk in the platoon CP after a 15-mile foot march, or experiencing the camaraderie of a group of men and women lying face down in the dirt, laughing after several 107-millimeter rockets whizzed past, or feeling the pride of standing in the National Joint Operations Intelligence Center after the team's expert management of a critical operation in the Middle East. As I leave Conway Hall today, those memories and so many more will stay with me. I'm excited about whatever is ahead and the chance to keep working to get that $40 for people in my life. I'm also excited to continue to build on the relationships and bonds that have supported me over these 34 years and for the new connections that await me in the next 34. Thank you for being here today and for all you have done, each of you, for Faye, Maddie, and me. This will defend.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the Army Song. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's ceremony. Please remain in place until the departure of the official party, after which you are welcome to join Lieutenant General Sims and his family for their reception in Patton Hall. Thank you for attending.